You know what time it is, no matter where you've been. So let's do it again. Listen up and let the sun shine in. We've got soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
And here's Daniel, Alan, and Joe.
Well, we discuss a lot of favorites on soul training, and today is no exception. We're going to talk about one of our favorite preachers, even to the point that before we get started, though, I want to ask you, what's your favorite Andy Griffith episode, Daniel?
My favorite Andy Griffith episode? Man, you got to give me a little bit of warning on some of these things.
I know one.
You know right off.
You go ahead, Joe.
Yeah,
You're the gifted and talented member. Go ahead.
When the goat ate the dynamite. That's my favorite one.
What was the goat's name?
Ooh, I don't know that one.
You know, Daniel?
Do you know the goat's name?
It'd take me a minute.
Does our guest know the goat's name?
I don't.
Oh, no.
Daniel, what's your...
I like the one, there are a ton of them I like. One that comes to mind is the one where Opie has seen this lineman.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mr. McBeevy.
Yeah, Mr. McBeevy. And he keeps describing it. Nobody believes that he's seen him, and he actually has.
That one. And then I guess my favorite is when Barney goes up and he buys some Army surplus, and he gets the motorcycle with the sidecar. And then some of the old boys standing outside, they all take the screws out of the sidecar, and he zooms off. That's my favorite.
I hadn't seen that one.
And there's a lot of good lines in that one. Like Andy puts on the Army helmet, and Barney says, "Don't wear my hat, Ange." He said, "My mother was like that." He said, "Don't do that."
I also like the one that Barney is in the choir, and he's trying to find who's singing off key.
Oh, and he gets that solo mic.
Yeah.
Speaking of dummy mics, yeah.
But there's a reason why that I knew that Jimmy was the goat's name, by the way. I had a caller reach out to me while we're doing this recording. Yet Jimmy was the goat's name. So I appreciate that caller contacting us during this.
I like to think that Saban is the goat's name. I don't.
Saban? No. His birthday's coming up, though, October 31st.
That's true.
Well,
you know?
I'm surprised you want to talk about football after last weekend.
Oh.
I say we're evergreen. We can't just be talking about last weekend.
That's good, Joe. I can't get a fist bump. That's good. See, we get sidetracked easy. Andy Griffith is, this. I knew it would create a lot of discussion, but one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk about the Andy Griffith Show is one of our favorite guests is also one of our favorite preachers. He's a huge Andy Griffith historian. If they ever offer a master's degree in the Andy Griffith Show, I'm sure this guy will work on some credits in that area. But if Mayberry could have a full-time preacher at the Mayberry Church of Christ, it would be the one and only Steve Higginbotham. He's here with us. In fact, Steve, before I want you to talk about you, I don't know if you remember this or not. You're hearing that a lot because you're with us this week as a special guest. But someone gave me a literal bag full of old bulletin articles, things that they had collected, and you'd put together, I don't know what the occasion was, but a songbook. And on the front of it said Mayberry Church of Christ. And there were a lot of songs in there, and you all must have been doing something fun or something. But it was just, I've got it.
I think someone plagiarized my name.
But if Mayberry had a full-time minister at the Mayberry Church of Christ, it would be Steve Higginbotham. Steve, tell us about yourself. I just have written down you've been preaching for almost 40 years, and you tell us about you, but we know you as, I'll let you do that just in a minute. We know you as Steve the speaker, but I've always been drawn to you for that, but also as Steve the writer. A lot of people don't talk about your writing, how good that is, but it's one of the big reasons why my family made the move to South Green was because of your writing. You would write in the bulletin every week, and I could not wait to get to the mailbox every Wednesday to get the bulletin before we came to this congregation to read what you had written. So your writing for me, is as good, if not, it's as good as your speaking or preaching. But I love Steve the writer. So tell us about you, Steve.
Well, first let me answer. It's Man in a Hurry. That's my favorite episode.
Okay.
Man
He
in a
talked
Hurry.
about the expert
Yeah.
and didn't ask him.
Yeah. Well, I was getting to that. It's a
And-
build up.
And a sermon for today. Those are my top two. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in West Virginia and went to Freed Hardeman to preach, to learn to preach, and came back home to West Virginia, to a place in southern West Virginia. It was called Nitro, and yeah, everybody makes jokes about that, but they made bombs for World War I believe, there.
Really?
So,
Wow.
and then we came to Glasgow and spent 21 years here, and about 13 years ago we moved to Carnes, and I'm the preaching minister there and teach in the School of Preaching there.
Wow. That's impressive.
It's a showstopper.
It is. What year did you show up in Glasgow?
It was
90?
89, and I was 27. Yeah,
Okay.
just a kid.
Well, 89 or 90. I remember that your last sermon here, you talked about Charles Tidwell. You said that he was referred to as a prince of a man,
Yeah,
and that he was a great mentor for you
he was.
and so many people.
Very good. Now, what are we talking about in this episode?
If my memory serves me correct, we're going to talk about an article. Speaking of writing,
There you go.
is that several years ago, it's literally been years ago when Facebook was really starting to infiltrate everybody's lives. That was the original social media for us, our generation. Steve put together a really good, as he always did and does and will do, article concise to the point that explains biblical content and how to help us continue to be transformed to Christ. And he wrote that about Facebook. About the Facebook Etiquette is the name of the article.
Yeah, Facebook Etiquette for Christians. And I didn't realize it was this long ago, but it was from April of 2012. You can find this article at preachinghelp.org where Steve writes. You can find a ton of articles, ton of information there.
And everything is totally free.
Totally free.
I even told my son that at one time Steve would even put together for you a thumb drive of just thousands of articles and sermons and everything for nothing.
Let's not inundate Steve with work
I'm
coming
sorry.
on our program. You forget sometimes people actually listen to this, Alan.
Yeah,
It's true.
I have to be reminded.
Worldwide.
But Steve is a tremendous resource too.
Yeah, and most of these pointers that we're about to go through, they were originally intended for Facebook, but they work equally well for TikTok or Snapchat or
Twitter.
X, which used to be Twitter.
Yeah, why did he do that?
I don't know.
You know what confuses me about X is now I don't know which one to click
Yeah.
to close the window down because there's two
Oh,
X's.
huh. How about that?
Yeah. Anyhow,
I thought you were gifted and talented.
well, at some things.
Yeah.
So I guess what we should do is, what if we go through these one by one, and then we'll have Steve elaborate a little on each point. Is that a fair plan?
Sure.
Well, what you have first is for when we're on social media, the etiquette we could use. You have number one, don't criticize the church or your brethren.
Correct. We've got to remember our forum. The world is watching, and if we run ourselves down, how do we ever think that anybody else would want to be a part of it? I remember a statement made in 2 Samuel chapter 1 and verse 20 when Saul died. David told the people, Saul was his enemy, but people came running to David and said, "Hey, Saul's dead." And you might have thought that he rejoiced in that, but instead he said, "Hey, don't tell this, lest the people of Gath rejoice." And, Gath is where Goliath lived. It's a Philistine city. And he was saying, we don't want to tell things that let the world glory in our misfortunes. And there are some bad things that happen in the church. We're made of people and we're flawed, but I don't want to advertise those things to the world.
Sure.
Yeah, don't air your dirty laundry.
Exactly.
And it's easy to do. You see somebody doing it, and it's easy to pile on. Everybody, I guess the word's commiserate. Is that right?
Yeah.
Number two, you like that, Alan?
I did. I tell you what.
I've read a couple of books. Number two, don't constantly whine.
Yes. Well, Philippians 2:14 says that we're not to murmur or complain. And we've had students go through the school. They want to preach. They spend 2 years in intensive learning, and then they get out and work. And because of their Facebook or their social media posting, they lose their job. And part of it is because all they have to say is "woe is me," whining and complaining. I had a teacher once that said, the Beatitudes say, "Blessed are those who mourn, not those who moan." And, we do a lot of moaning, or I read a lot of moaning by people online, and I think it's counterproductive.
And you'll find out real quick with me and Daniel and our chief engineer, Joe, is that we do try to, I guess, we interject or ask questions or make points too. And something I think about what you just touched on. So you have seen people lose their jobs preaching jobs over their post.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they just, I've seen that in I hear that as a school teacher when we have community partnerships with people, HR people who will come in and talk to kids. And I'm hearing that more and more and more, that your social media will follow you. I even had in one of our best organizations in Kentucky, the Kentucky State Police. I had a gentleman a trooper who came. He was a public information officer, and he came and talked to a group of kids. And he says that when you get so far in the process with our organization, you sign a document and you relinquish all of your social media accounts, and you don't lie to us about what your passwords are and everything. And he said, we just start digging. And he told the kids, the group I was with, he said, I've seen a lot of guys come in, best physical performance, great shape, may have a bachelor's degree, suit, everything, wonderful interview. And then we start digging, and that stops the process. So that's another side little thing that you've seen too, from even that can cost you your livelihood too.
Yeah. And even from a Christian standpoint, we have been infinitely blessed more than our troubles. And to focus on our troubles publicly really is a disfavor or disservice to the blessings that God has given us.
Why do we do that, though? We have all these blessings. Why do we focus on that one splinter that's just nagging us? Why do we do that?
Yeah.
I'm guilty.
I think we all are, to some degree. Where were we? Number 3. Don't take cryptic pot shots at some unnamed person. Mm-hmm. We see that a lot.
Yeah. Well, it does two things. Number one, it's not the biblical way to resolve your problems. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, you go to them and you get your matters solved, going to them and not talking about them in some cryptic way to other people. And the other negative to that is that it piques the interest or the curiosity of people that are totally uninvolved. They're like, what's going on? And so then you start having people, prying and trying to get information out of you that you don't need to be telling anybody else. You need to be talking to the person that you have an issue with.
Number 4, think before you post.
We have had students that come to the school, and one of the first things we do, and I do this in orientation, is I tell them, clean your Facebook up. I can't tell you how many guys that they have stuff on their Facebook page that is totally inappropriate, not just for those who want to be preachers, but for Christians. And it's kind of shocking that we have, split our life in such a way that we can have certain things, but then on Sunday, we're totally different. And we got to do better than that. We're representatives of Jesus. And if somebody looks at your Facebook page and, you're not representing Jesus, you're doing it wrong.
I learned recently that I was listening to somebody talk, and they said that your social media post really reflects your conscience.
Yeah.
And that kind of hit me pretty hard. Not hard, but it made me think. But
yeah, that reminds me when social media was new back in the day of, MySpace. You remember MySpace? and the earlier days of Facebook. Initially, it was sort of discouraging to me in ministry because you would see this other side of people that you worked with that were you thought, hey, these are faithful Christians. I see them at church every time the doors are open, and then you see this other side of their life that is not as Christ-like as you would have had expected it to be. And initially, that was very discouraging to me. But eventually, I came to see it as, well, at least now that's open and honest. I'm getting a realistic look at who people are and what things need to be addressed. I'm not saying you need to post things that are unchrist-like. I'm saying that when other people do, there's an opportunity in it for the people that love them in their lives.
I've said, and this is not something I'm not trying to be funny. I mean, it's sad really, but a few years ago when Facebook first came out, I had a friend of mine, him and his wife, unfortunately eventually got divorced. But you could tell when they were arguing because his wife would post something and he would say something back. Mm-hmm. And it just never, even though that social media was in its infancy, it didn't compute for me. And I thought, that just doesn't make sense. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I think we've all seen something like that, and you just have that grimace on your face like, eee, please don't. Don't do that publicly.
I think part of it is you wind up, it is so public, but private when you post it. So like
That's
you're
a great
sitting
point.
in your room, your phone, your office, whatever, and it's just you and your device, and it can feel like Dear Diary.
Yeah.
And you put it out there, things that you probably would not say if there were actually 1,500 people sitting around watching you say it.
I like how you said that it's a public post, but you think about it privately. That's deep.
Very deep, Daniel. Good job. Don't post inappropriate pictures is number 5.
Yeah. I know that everybody has a past that, if we were to expose everything in our life, we wouldn't want people, we'd be terribly embarrassed. And there are people who come to Christ and they have pre-Christian Facebook posts. Clean it up, take it down, go through and look at your stuff. Don't just leave things so that your friends can just kind of browse through your pictures and posts and see things that are unchristlike or unbecoming. And it's a problem. At the school of preaching, we have so many guys that are just so heavily involved in social media and a lot of different platforms, not just Facebook. But it doesn't take but a minute to see things to say, hey, you need to take that picture down. And if they don't realize that elders will look at that, they're really short-sighted, because they absolutely will.
I mean, I've heard a lot of employers, especially here in our little community, local business owners, they say when they hire somebody, that's the first place they go. They don't even look at the application. They go to their social media. That's their first place. So,
like you said, we can learn a lot about somebody from that. And you talked about cleaning it up. Boy, if somebody ever splits with their boyfriend or husband or whatever, those pictures are cleaned up really quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Some of the old inappropriate ones might be hanging around. Number 6, do some self-evaluation.
And what I was talking about when I said that was there is such a gap between what we profess. Some of what we've been able to compartmentalize our Christianity. Like you can look at the likes of a guy on Facebook and I like the Bible, I like the church. And then you get down to the movie section and it's, all these salacious movies, he likes those too. And so I'm thinking, how do you reconcile that? You can't compartmentalize your Christianity like that. You can't have bitter springs and good springs, and the good not be contaminated. So if you see inconsistency in what you're posting about yourself, you need to make changes to get consistent. I've always said that you can't have a faith that differs from your morals. If your faith and morals are on different levels, either your faith will lower to the level of your morals, or your faith or your morals will rise to the level of your faith. But you can't exist with that inconsistency.
Yeah, and I think you'll be careful with this, but whenever it gets election season, you learn a lot about people.
Yeah.
And so I think this isn't one of the 10. But
it should be 11.
If I was allowed to put an 11th one, it would be we shouldn't be overly political, because we're first and foremost Christians before we're affiliated with a political party.
Well, I mean, with that, if we are going to be political, let's be Christian in how we do it.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what all this really gets down to. Is social media is about an image that you're presenting. Many people do it very carefully. They're crafting an image. The whole influencer thing is all about creating an image, and then a lot of people do it accidentally. They're just posting stuff without much rhyme or reason. It's just whatever occurs to them. But as they do it, they're presenting an image. And they're letting people know about who they are, or at least how they're portraying themselves. And I've thought before, so many people forget that they are representing Christ. It would almost be helpful if, like, in your profile name, it said, Daniel Gaines, a follower of Jesus. And I had to see that every time I was going to post something. And anybody that read what I post would see that. It kind of puts a little extra pressure that, hey, how I present myself and any topics that I might deal with, whether it be politics or morals or humor or whatever, needs to be something that is dealt with in a way that would not bring shame to the name of Christ.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't put your guy or girl out there you're voting for, whatever. But we all know there are some things that are uglier than others.
Oh, yeah.
And just these one-shot memes that just bam, I nailed you on that.
Yeah.
That amounts to nothing. I mean, it's not helpful. It's
I've seen Christians post some of the most hateful memes that just and I tend to hold my side to a higher standard than I do the other side. The people that I agree with in essence. Because I want them presenting it in the right way, in a Christ-like way, in a loving way. And when you put something out there that is just hateful and making your point, that's not the way to do it.
Yeah. So whenever you rewrite this article, we all expect some credit for number 11.
728B.
Yeah, that's right. Officially here, number 7. Don't use Facebook as an escape from reality.
If you're unhappy with your marriage, get off Facebook and work on your marriage. There are a lot of people that are not happy, and so they seek this fantasy world and have relationships. Actually, I think social media is a medium for a lot of broken marriages and unfaithfulness. And you don't just wake up with somebody who isn't your spouse one morning. It doesn't happen that way. It happens through a long period of breaking down barriers. And if you find yourself talking to somebody else, you need to evaluate why are you doing that. Oftentimes it's just, I'm not happy here, so I'm going to go out here and see if I can find some of my needs fulfilled. And then it often devolves into some really bad stuff.
And I don't want to diverge from our topic here, but something years ago that my wife and I, we didn't even talk about, we just did it, that we both have access to one another's cell phone passwords, and which means, I have no idea what my Facebook login information is. I just don't. I can't remember it. But if you have my password to my cell phone, then you can get into everything. So years ago, we didn't talk about it. We just did it. That I think is one of the things, especially with young people or people of any age, that, give your spouse, those credentials from your email. Now, you can't do work email. I mean, there's privacy acts and stuff like that, but your personal email, my wife can log into my email or look at my email anytime she wants, or text messages and social media. And so, like, to your point, I think early on, I think that's where a lot of people had started with a message, those kind of things, and just snowballed from there. So
I think that's a good idea.
My kids have my password to my cell phone.
What's
They're
your
adults.
password?
I'm not going to tell you all.
Sounds like you're throwing it out there quite a bit.
Don't ask my kids; they'll tell you, and they're adults. But I think that's just a good practice, transparency. I think with your family.
Yeah, and that really, really ought to be a given, that you don't have secret areas that are hidden from your spouse. That there's openness.
I mean, I've seen some people just about I've seen kids have a meltdown when mom says, "Give me your phone," or the wife says, "Give me your phone," or the husband says, "Give me your phone." I've seen with my own eyes meltdowns.
Really?
People just it becomes a big thing. So that's
that makes
concerning.
You think something's up if there's a meltdown. And also that makes me think I need to get my wife's Facebook, because we've been married over 15 years, and last time I looked, anyhow, you look at her relationship status.
I've seen it.
And it says like married, but in parentheses it says pending.
I saw that.
And I was like, come on. How long do we have to be married before you finally accept this?
Apparently. Long time.
Actually, Steve was the one that performed our wedding.
I did.
And
Is there a signature?
And it's still pending, is it?
it's still, well, I will tell you, I told my wife this, so I'm not going to surprise her when she listens. But you don't remember, but we were by the door about to come out, and I'm not exactly sure what Steve said, but I remember it not being comforting at all before we walked through that door. Something along the lines of like, "This is your last chance," or something like that. And I thought, oh my goodness.
Not with Allison. That would have been somebody else.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I went through with it anyhow. So, and we thank you for it.
And you're still pending.
And we're still pending. One of these days we'll get there. Number 8, be kind.
Yeah, well, Ephesians 4:32 tells us to be kind to one another. And you mentioned this, but I think we get behind a keyboard. We don't have to look at people face to face.
Keyboard warrior.
Yeah, we get really big and bold. And I've had conversations with people, when they rail on me, I don't respond publicly, but I will write to them. And I've often said, I just want to know, would you talk to me this way if we were face to face? I'm not threatening, but I mean, really, is that how you would talk to a person? And it just kind of stops them. They've never, then they just keep going. But I had a few years ago a guy that got upset with me, and so he rented a truck and put a billboard on the side of it. Had my picture, Phil Sanders' picture.
I remember that.
Yeah. And parked it on the interstate where everybody was coming into PTP, and posted it on Facebook and all this kind of nonsense. And
That's a lot of effort to publicly air a grievance.
It really is. And that is not the way.
Just two things. One, do you remember what it was over? And I was going to ask a question, too.
Well, it's like a guilt by association thing.
Oh, okay.
I spoke where somebody spoke who knew somebody that knew somebody
and you
that
passed, you passed somebody in the hallway,
Yeah.
and you're guilty. And I know, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I didn't go to law school, but maybe you all had law classes. But doesn't that border on like libel or slander or harassment or?
Well, I don't know.
Probably.
But I will say,
I mean, legally. I mean,
it's just unbecoming. I can't imagine someone who's contemplating becoming a child of God and then watching that out of people who are children of God. And it's beneath what we're supposed to be.
Number 9, don't gossip.
Yeah, the same rules that apply to the tongue apply to the keyboard, and we don't give that much thought. We hear something, and immediately we just, forward it. We pass it on because we heard it. But you wouldn't do that if, we would acknowledge, well, that's gossip. I don't know that fact is correct. I can't say. What we would do with our mouth, we just, without hesitation, do with our keyboard. And the rules, I suppose if James were writing the book of James, chapter 3 today, he wouldn't say the tongue is a fire, a ruly fire. He might say the keyboard if he was writing that today. But we those same rules apply about gossip.
And number 10, use it for good.
Yeah, I can't. If the Apostle Paul were here today and he knew that he could reach people on the other side of the world for next to nothing, price-wise, he would be all over social media. But it wouldn't be about some of the things that goes on today on social media. But we need to speak of our faith often on social media. And maybe a good thing to do is to evaluate, like, okay, football season's coming up. How many times do you talk about football on social media? Well, how many times have you talked about Jesus on social media? Sometimes what we go through and talk about betrays where our loyalties are. And we may find that we have more worldly loyalties than we do to the kingdom, to the advancement of the kingdom and the cause of Christ.
When you wrote number 10, when you typed in finally use it for good, Daniel and Joe will tell you I'm a big follower of Dale and Jeff Jenkins, and I've heard Dale talk about many times. He says that I use my Facebook, for pictures and those kind of things, but he says Jeff uses it for the good. Not that Dale doesn't, but Jeff uses it to basically he posts little devotionals and encouragements and things like that on his Facebook page. He uses it for the good to build up.
And you don't have to just be putting a devotional on there. I'll brag publicly on South Green Street over the past couple of weeks. Our members have shared and shared and shared invitations to our gospel meeting that we're having this week with Steve. And I don't know if you've seen all of them, Steve.
I have.
But I have never seen a concerted effort from any congregation, really, to get a unified message out like what we have over the past couple of weeks. I'm really proud and excited about the work that the congregation at South Green has done on Facebook, Twitter, those sort of things here lately.
Yeah, and even if you are a person that enjoys engaging in more controversial discussions online, like some people do, there's even a way to do that in a good way if you engage in those things in a way that shows grace and kindness and mercy and lovingness. You engage in those things in a Christ-like way, and sometimes you can create opportunities, maybe for yourself, maybe for some other Christian, because you tear down a barrier by breaking a stereotype that just because we're talking about something about which we may disagree doesn't mean I'm going to be hateful about it. I'm going to treat you with respect as we do that. And there needs to be more people. One of the problems, I think, with our society is that there's kind of this unwritten rule. You don't talk about religion and politics. Don't talk about things that people feel strongly about. Well, we need to talk about things people feel strongly about. We've forgotten how to do it. We've forgotten how to talk respectfully with somebody with whom we disagree. And our society would be much better off if we relearned that skill. And I think Christians can lead the way in that.
Yeah. Speaking of using it for good, though, it's a real easy way to evangelize. Just hit the share button.
Yeah.
So far, no one's, slugged me for sharing something from church. I've had generally positive reactions from folks or no reaction, and I can deal with that as long as it's getting out there. But things like when someone like Steve writes an article, just share it. Mm-hmm. You never know who's going to read it. Or when the Jenkins or shameless plug, whenever we put a soul training thing out there announcing a new episode, share that.
Do you share that on Facebook? Is that available for our listener?
If you go to our Facebook page, I do share our little graphics. So please share those. That'll help
So
out a lot.
what was that social tag? If somebody wants to find Soul Training on
I
Facebook,
don't know. Just search
at
for Soul
Training.
If you
Podcast.
search Soul Training Podcast, you're going to get all of our stuff. And we're at time, Daniel.
Okay, all right. So let's wrap it up. We were already talking about how to find us and follow us and share, and we would appreciate it if you do that. Dear listener, we are so thankful to you for letting us be a part of your spiritual journey. We love to hear from you. We love getting listener comments and questions. If you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we still want to hear from you, and we really relish that. We want to thank Steve for taking time out of his evening to be a part of this. It's been a blessing to us, and I hope it has been to you as well, dear listener. And we want to thank the elders at the South Green Street Church of Christ for making the Soul Training Podcast possible. So until next time, keep soul training.
Soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
To learn more, you can email us at soultrainingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can write to us, P.O. Box 503, Glasgow, Kentucky, 42142. That's Soul Training.